Friends, we need to talk about this twin flame basic. That is actually never a twin flame basic that I know of, but I think it should be a twin flame basic, and that is not recognizing your twin flame. So let's try to set this up for you. What is this about? I wrote some lines. Here they are. Not recognizing your twin flame is actually what we need to talk about as a phenomenon. Most divine feminines I came across in this work were intensely entangled with psychological problems, traumatized or not balanced or unhealed. All twin flame signs work. The twin flame signs, the 19 of the video that came before this one, when you are your true self. All twin flame signs work when you are your true self. When you are not, it can be skewed and be an illusion, a condition which you can overcome. Okay, so that was the lines that I wrote about that. And yeah, it's a phenomenon. It happened to me, that I just did not recognize my twin flame. I knew in my heart that I had met the twin flame, that it felt close, and particularly more close at certain moments. It was almost dramatically close at certain moments, like shaking me, like, oh my God. And I knew this was the twin flame phenomenon. And this could have also happened to you. For many people, this some sort of introduces itself like this. Yeah, like, oh, something moved into my life that is different. I feel it in my heart. This is different. I have this deeper longing. And this must be the twin flame. And you could very well be right. But maybe just like me, potentially, well, it happened to me, you can't recognize the person that is the true twin flame in the outside world to go with that. Exactly. The fact that the twin flame is a calling in your life is true. But can you point out the correct person of flesh and blood that it really is? Even when you do the 19 twin flame signs, and I was getting them up here on my computer again so that I can talk about it again with you, because one is your twin flame actually does love you perfectly at all times. And you may think that your true twin flame is the one you think it is, and that is what your heart felt this fluttering about. And you may think from what they do or are to you that they indeed love you perfectly at all times. But it is possible that you misjudge that, and that you do not see it correctly, that what they do is not love at all. And sometimes a twin flame can do something that on the surface looks like unloving, but they would at least share the true underlying soul space with you, and you can feel that. And that is able to be discerned by you, by doing the inner work, by recognizing what is really going on. When you are, well, not skewed by psychological problems. When you are, you might think that someone that is not your twin flame is standing there doing certain actions that are unkind, but you actually think they are love. Maybe you even tell yourself that with the reasoning of the twin flame signs. Like, oh, they must mean it well, because I'm sure they are my twin flame, so they must actually love me. It feels awful, but they must actually love me. But maybe you are interpreting the whole situation as wow, they're lying to me, they're treating me like less than a friend. They actually do as if I'm the enemy. But I interpret it as love. I'm not even thinking about this twin flame sign, that the twin flame mirrors something that's inside of you and they actually deep down do love you. Maybe I just think that their unkindness, they're treating me less than your worst enemy. Maybe I think that is actually loving. Maybe I have been growing up in a situation in which this was kind of normal. They desert me, but it was very normal. And as a child, you wish and hope and want to hold on to the idea that you do have a parent that does love you. So you start to interpret that your parent, for instance, um, abandoned you as love. And now you start to think that this person is loving you while they're blatantly abandoning you, for instance. This is what my false twin flame did. And I thought he was loving me because I was deeply traumatized, because I was having toxic traits myself, because of the traumatization. I was unhealed. I was, what did I call it? In psychological problems. I was unbalanced. And I know that it even seems to be a thing in popular mainstream culture and on social media as well, that sounds a bit like this. You're a woman, so you're beautiful and you're completely awesome and loving and psychologically sane because you are a woman. And that is of course not so. Well, let's leave the beautiful thing. I don't know why I said that. But you are not psychologically awesome knowing what relating and love is because you are a woman. That's not the case. And that's okay. So I said that most divine feminines I came across in this work were intensely entangled with these psychological issues. And so was I. So I understand. And it's okay and it's beautiful because the whole thing is this is a healing journey which is actually perfectly, I cannot stress this enough, perfectly designed for you to completely heal that. But it has to be faced for that healing to happen. And often we need to make a new choice to be our true selves instead of our false selves that came into being because we were, for instance, treated by kind of narcissistic leaning mothers wrong as very young babies and toddlers, and you hadn't separated from them to become an autonomous person because the baby is one with the mother, and then you need to psychologically separate from them around year 3 to become an autonomous psychological person. And that, for instance, hasn't happened correctly, and you've also been mirrored bad things about who you are because the mother is supposed to mirror positively into the baby and toddler. But she may have done that with negative things, right? Or turning the roles around, which happens a lot too. And that means that, well, I give this example. It happens a lot. It can also all happen in different psychological ways, in different phases of growing up developmentally. Who knows? But I'm very well known to this one. And that means that you have come to embrace a false self because the separation didn't work correctly when you were 3. and your mother has negatively projected onto you, like mirrored you. So you think you are an awful person, and this is a false self that has been set up because you have not been correctly separated psychologically from them, which is another use of the word separation, not as in twin flame separation, as in spiritual separation, but we're now talking about the psychological layer in life, which is different than the overarching spiritual layer. That is always the context that I talk about, because that's my actual work. And that is also why it is deeply healing, and you can get rid of these things to completion perfectly. That is because we are here in the psychological, in a spiritual layer. That's where we operate in, right? That's where our relationship operates in. That's where the tools operate in, etc. So it is very well possible that you need to go back to before 3 years old to retrieve the real self and start that developmental thing psychologically over and move through all of that. After you have chosen to repair it, after you have made a new choice. And this happens for a lot of people on the twin flame journey. And that's awesome. It's really beautiful. There's no problem in this, because it actually guarantees that you will move through this to your advantage. So don't get me wrong. So when I look again at the list of twin flame signs, then we see two. You do think the same deeper thoughts around the same time. Yeah, when you are in your true self, this is true, and it is just genuinely what you can expect with a true twin flame. That's just how it is. End of story. But when you're not in your true self and you have actually psychological trauma, you may see this incorrectly. You may think like, okay, so I think this is my twin flame. That's what it was about. Not recognizing the twin flame, because maybe they're not. That's what we're talking about here. And I think they think the same things as I do, but that's actually projection. I think that we go in the same direction, which is another sign, stemming from having the same thoughts around the same time. But it's not true. I thought that too about my false twin flame. I thought we had the same thoughts around the same time, wanting to help the world with holistic body treatments, which I was doing, and it's still integrated in all my work that I share. And he did something about that too, something like that. And I thought, oh, we want the same things, we have the same thoughts, and he was going to go to this other country to start that up there. And I was like, cool, I will do something indeed as well, but staying in this country. So I thought that was like a twin flame sign, but it clearly wasn't, because it was not my true twin flame. And I couldn't see that what he showed me was actually never having the same thoughts around the same time. His motivation was completely different than mine. He wasn't even having these thoughts, really. Like, for instance, oh, let me start now sharing this holistic body tool with the world, and that's why I go to this other country. By the way, leaving me. When I look back at it now and see more clearly what kind of psychological problems I had, but then also that were actually, he was mirroring my psychological problems, right? My psychological trauma, because he was not real. That wasn't even real. Well, he did go to this other country, but that's not the reason why he did that. Maybe he genuinely didn't know why he did all these things that he did, but it was certainly not to genuinely help the world with holistic body tools. He still did something like that, But that was more like a facade, a mask to be able to escape the whole world and don't care about anybody and escape relationships and escape responsibility. That was actually what he was doing. That was his main motivation, like behind the scenes, right? So he was in his false self. But don't get me wrong, I see myself correctly. I was also in my false self, that married each other perfectly, if you will, right? But I could not see that this was not my twin flame as a result as well. You need to be in your true self. When you think about the twin flame development and you come in the relationship with me directly, and we start to move closer, and you do the correct inner work, and I guide you to do the correct inner work. And at a certain point, you reach that twin flame vibration that I can pass on, that I helped you get there. I helped you get there. And then the state of consciousness of harmonious twin flame union sort of steps over from me to you as a fire that is now has reached you. And then you're in it, and that's awesome. And we can conclude that together that is so. That's approximately how it goes. And this is the goal that we have here, coming in the consciousness state of harmonious twin flame union. And of course, after that, maintain it and work it out and build. And in many respects, the whole thing starts really, not ends, with harmonious twin flame union, the consciousness state. So that might be good to know. So, but then you're in the vibration. And that's awesome. But you can already start before, or you feel really pushed into this healing afterwards because of it starts to build now, so you have to move through this healing. What I'm trying to say is that you are now in the vibration, and then that needs to translate itself into the lower layer of your psychology. And often we need to make a new choice there to start to be our true selves. And this is like derived from the fact that you are in the right harmonious union vibration, but you still have to do that actual psychological work to come in the right, sort of mindset, sort of healed psychology. It happens a lot. And when you finally do that, or earlier in the journey, I would love to make that clear to you, because you can start to recognize the right kind of elements in your journey, the right kind of signs in the right kind of way, etc. So when I look at the signs again, we see 3. You go in the same direction with your twin flame. Right, but if you are not in the right psychology, you might think that you are going in the right direction, the same direction as your twin flame. But maybe that's not so. And you don't fully realize that. 4, even when they are seemingly an asshole to you, deep down they love you. That is a twin flame sign. But if they're not your twin flame and you don't feel on that deep down level, that is your soul, you don't really feel there yet, you're dissociated from that level most of the time, you actually might think that they are an asshole, so they must be your twin flame. And you misunderstand the whole sign. Or you think that they love you, but they're actually not your twin flame and acting as a genuine asshole to you, which you should just cut off. And then that shows you that you're actually, that you're meddling in the wrong layer. Now you're meddling in the psychological layer instead of the bigger overarching spiritual layer that it actually should be about. And it also shows that in the psychological layer you have significant trouble. Share your fundamental core values. That's what the true twin flame does. It's a twin flame sign that I shared in the other video. And yeah, it's the same. You may think that you share core values with someone that is not your twin flame, but it's actually not so. Sometimes we also don't have our own core values clear. I, for instance, did not have my core values clear at all. I did not know them because I had significant psychological trauma, because I grew up with narcissistic abuse and sexual abuse, and I was full of having been told as a child how stupid I was and how awful. And there was no room for knowing what my core values are or starting to know them through genuine research in myself, because that was just not done. Narcissistic abuse means, among others, that you don't have a self, that your self has been replaced by a false self. And so that tells you all that you need to know, that there is you don't know your core values. Okay, so the true twin flame will want to go deeper with you every time, whereas a false twin flame won't. Well, maybe you're so much psychologically traumatized that you don't recognize what this going deeper is, and you don't know if if this person that you think is your twin flame is going there with you or not. You see how this plays into each other enormously, your psychological state and the true twin flame signs. And the true twin flame signs are absolute. They are absolutely true as well, and they are about the bigger layer where the rest falls under, one category under it. That's psychology, that falls under it, but it's not the same. And that's a lot with the true twin flame work, that it is about that bigger layer, the most fundamental layer. It's about the spiritual layer in you, the deepest layer. And it is not about the psychological layer in essence, but you will repair your psychological layer on the journey. You will get to know what's wrong with it. That is absolutely what is included when you do the correct twin flame inner work that anchors into the bigger layer of your spiritual development. And when you do have significant psychological trauma, it might be that you interpret all situations incorrectly and the signs incorrectly. And it might very well be that you're not recognizing your twin flame. Now, I literally saw that a lot as well in my working practice, that people come to me and I point them to the true twin flame, or in the strong indications in the direction of them, which come through my connection with Divine Mother, and then feeling you out and then passing on what needs to be passed on. And I have often seen that people also don't want to recognize their twin flame. They don't want that because they say, no, that's not true. Well, that's not why I hear these things from Divine Mother, for you to tell me that it's not true. That's not how that works. It is true. And that means that they are rejecting the twin flame, which means that they are rejecting themselves, who they are in the union. So not recognizing your twin flame actually points to the fact that we don't recognize ourselves, because we are one at the core with the true twin flame. You don't recognize yourself, who you are on the union level, on the harmonious union level, truly, who you truly are in divine light, on the level of where you are one with your twin flame. You don't recognize yourself there, which is the same as saying, well, it collides with, let's say it like this, it collides with saying that you need to make the choice to be your true self with this psychology story underneath it. And that's where the psychology story and the spiritual story about the actual true twin flame level, so to speak, meet. You do not recognize your true self as what you are in the union. Sometimes we also see that people don't recognize who they are there because they might think about themselves as another gender than they are on the soul level, on that level of the twin flame union. Sometimes they don't understand what that means, and then we have not recognizing the self. Sometimes we have seen that just not recognizing who you are there is like self-rejection, and that keeps the twin flame away. And that is actually the whole point that you're trying to overcome. That's also something we've seen. And for me, that was true. I self-rejected. And it was relatively subtle, you could say, but it was nevertheless there. And it had to be worked through to completion, and I had to make a new choice. And I had to go to my true self. And that means that, well, that it was, you could say it was subtle, means that it was conformed society and how I grew up and how I was trained and how my family wanted to think about me. So that seemed congruent in the world. But it was not my true self on the twin flame level. So that's how it seemed subtle, because it sort of worked in the world. But it was actually not my true self. And that's why I couldn't recognize my true twin flame, although he was in my vicinity in my teenage time, and from the time I was 29 again in my vicinity. 28, 29. In my vicinity more or less constantly. But until I was definitively in the state of consciousness of harmonious twin flame union, I couldn't recognize my twin flame as my twin flame. I was still always thinking about, like, maybe at the end I thought, but I actually was like, maybe the other guy. But maybe the other guy. And that corrected itself, right? And after that came this whole psychological thing as well. Choosing to be the true self, and all psychological healing and changes that came from that. Not recognizing your twin flame. That should be the topic. It is a topic for me, is really a basic, I think. It can be completely overcome, because by following the right kind of work with the right kind of teacher, in the right kind of community, with the right kind of tools and guidance, you know that you will get to the state of consciousness of harmonious twin flame union. Things will be clarified there. And you will be asked, by you continually moving forward in the building department with your true twin flame, that you will feel compelled to make a new choice, and work through everything that is there that pointed you towards not recognizing yourself there, right? Towards making the choice to be your true self there. And it will work for you. And it is the way to actually work out all vague pains in your body and vague complaints about your mental health and vague emotional issues, or blatant ones for that matter. Everything will be worked out there when you follow this twin flame path. And I have also deeply spiritual things that come closely to this problem in other ways as well, such as the first initiation, in which we actually see that many people have that in the Western world, and they all come to me and they have a like a protector or protection, spiritual protection or protector that has been turned against them. And we can repair that as one of the things that can happen in initiation 1. And that is very helpful for all of this too. There are many things that support the same changes that need to happen in this twin flame journey with these kinds of problems. That's what I mean to say with that. And we can work through all that together when you take my hand and be in a relationship together. Because that is eventually the biggest healing tool that I can offer you. That is, be and stay in the relationship. And then everything will come in order, and all the things that you need will come forward at the right time. And that's why I'm here. And that's what I offer. And that's what I do every day. And that's what I love. So please come closer. And let's find out how to not self-reject, how to recognize yourself on the union level, how to come together with your true twin flame and start to feel awesome and real good. Oh my God, I feel so good. I have never felt better. It's really extremely different than just a little bit of fun that I had years ago or something. It's a peace that is permanent. It's a happiness that is permanent, that just takes over your energy world and therefore your daily life and therefore the entire world. And that's how this path is also a path for people that want to change the world, but truly change the world. Change the world through divine love and letting that form you and transform you, that's better to say, in the first place, so that true love can touch other people as well. And that is the priority that we need in the world with all these deep problems of society and nature and wars. We need true peace, and it starts inside. And it is exactly the same as this twin flame path. So I hope this all helps and makes you be warmed up to choose your true self and recognize your twin flame. Love from Petra.